Hi everyone, my name's Dave. I'm the director at Bloc Projects. My preferred pronouns are he, him. At the moment, I am wearing a black hoodie and I have short blonde hair, wearing black glasses, and I'm a white man. As I mentioned to begin with, if everybody could keep their cameras off and their microphones muted, it'd just give you the best experience of the webinar today. If you ensure that your Zoom feature is on gallery view, which you can select in the top right hand corner of Zoom. It means that you get a tile per speaker. It also means that you're able to see our fantastic BSL interpreters as well. So just to give you a brief overview of the structure for today, I'm going to finish giving a brief introduction and then pass over to my colleague Sunshine, who's going to introduce the session, who's waving just now. And then we're going to pass to our speakers. We're going to run until about 7:40, 7:45 and have a short 10-minute break to allow everybody a bit of time to relax, refresh, and come back after 10 minutes. And then we're going to continue the conversation. And then there's an opportunity to ask some questions in the last 10 or 15 minutes back to our speakers. What we encourage everyone to do is to use the chat function in the bottom of your screen to be able to add comments as the webinar's progressing, to ask questions, and Sunshine and myself will be pulling together some of those comments and questions, as well as the speakers will be checking that to be able to answer and to refer back to some of them. As I said, we've got two fantastic BSL interpreters joining us today. So at the moment you can see Max. We also have Catherine, Max and Catherine. Catherine's on the screen. Max and Catherine will be swapping throughout the session. If anybody would feel more comfortable asking a question or contributing to the conversation through their video, just mention in the chat function and we'll be able to make sure there's plenty of opportunity to turn cameras on and unmute if someone would rather ask a question that way or sign a question. I think that's about it. The final thing is just to mention that this webinar has been recorded, so it will be put on our website afterwards. If anybody has any concerns or wants to ask any questions about that, get in touch with us after the session, get in contact with us. All our contact details will be circulated at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to stop speaking and pass over to my colleague Sunshine. Thanks.
Oh, thanks, Dave. Yeah, welcome everyone. Today is our last edition of Harsh Light for this September. Oh yeah, I'm Sunshine and I'm the public program coordinator at Bloc Projects. My pronouns are she and her. To describe myself, I'm Chinese. I have black hair tied back. I'm wearing glasses and I have a gray jumper on today. Yeah, so like the last two sessions, I opened the webinar with a quick rundown of what Harsh Light is and introduce the speakers. And I also lead a really brief body centering exercise just for a few minutes. And I always say you don't have to take part in it, but I just hope that this short exercise can give us a little time to ground and feel present, because otherwise we're just kind of in our own separate places, don't feel a sense of group togetherness, I guess. And plus it's quite a nice way to open up and settle into a conversation. So yeah, this first set of Harsh Light webinars, we've done two so far. This is our third one. It feels like it's really gone by super quick. And for us as a host organization, we felt like it's been a real privilege to host these speakers and hold the space for people to come and think through some things. For those of you who missed the first two sessions, we've talked about so many different things, from working with and against funding bodies like Arts Council England and Arts Council Wales when thinking through issues of structural racism. And last week we were kind of reimagining sector speak, like sustainability. So beyond just the longevity of a single organization, thinking about what sustainable means in terms of committing to others and to the arts ecology. So Harsh Light has definitely become a place for collective learning, speculating, and signposting. And we've definitely benefited a lot from this, and judging from some feedback from attendees the last couple of weeks, it's been helpful and invigorating for our viewers and listeners as well. So we're really happy that it's resonating. So to introduce our three speakers tonight, they are all affiliated with ActionSpace in London, which is a visual arts organization that supports artists with a range of learning needs. Cheryl Canto is its co-director and has been since 2008. She's committed to providing artists with learning disabilities with the same opportunities as their peers. Thompson Hall, he's a painter with a studio at ActionSpace. He describes his work as more abstract than true to life. And Thompson's interpretation of the world around him is a window to a soul. Charlotte Hollinshead is the artist facilitator and supports artists with complex needs to develop their individual art practice, and she delivers an extensive range of commissions, projects, events, and exhibitions. So we've come to the body centering exercise. Really, it's all about just tapping into how we feel at the moment, to remind ourselves that it's there. It lets us do what we need to do through the day. So if you prefer to turn your cameras off for this, those with cameras on, you can do so. Otherwise, I'm just going to stand up and you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to pull this a little bit closer so I can keep my earbuds in. So standing up, just you can loosen your limbs a little bit. If you want to, you can stretch a little bit. Really, it's just about kind of feeling your body in right now. So I want to focus on balance today primarily. So 4 directions, going forward and backward, left and right. If you've got slippers or house shoes or whatever on your feet, you can take them off. I like to feel the ground under my feet so I can feel the sense of balance a bit better. But you can just keep your feet about 4 inches apart or so, and just see if you can let your body sway forward and backwards, left and right, as far as it can go, and just bring it back to the center. So that's the, oh, okay. I kind of went to the right a bit too much. So the idea is try to see how far you can push your body in any one direction without falling over. So where are your boundaries and your limits? And how far can you go before you have to bring yourself back to center? So that's our little exercise. And don't chastise yourself if you wobble or anything. It's just noticing how your body feels. And to end, we're just going to do 2 deep breaths. Try to breathe in and out through your nose and allow your breath to expand in your chest, opening the space around your heart. So 2 deep breaths. The first one. And the second one. Okay. Thanks for doing that with us if you took part. And you can turn your cameras back on, those who need to have your cameras on. I'm going to hand it over to Sheryll, Thompson, and Charlotte now. And I'm just going to quickly frame this first part of the conversation before we go for the break at 20 to 8. So they're going to talk about the difficulties that are presented by the term disability and discuss the different kinds of support they provide the artists at ActionSpace. Recently, they've had a few artists that have received some attention from the wider art world. So the opening questions will be 2 things. 1, what does it mean to support artists with learning needs for you? And 2, how has it been navigating the interest from art institutions or galleries that don't have the same focus as yourselves? So the first part of the conversation, I think, will be primarily between Sheryl and Thompson, if I'm correct, because Thompson will probably step out after that. But Thompson, you're totally welcome to stay if you like. It's just I'm aware that you might want to step away, which is totally fine. So, and then after that, Sheryl and Charlotte will continue the conversation in the vein of those two questions. So thank you.
Okay. Hi. I'm Cheryl Catto, and I'm co-director of ActionSpace. My preferred pronouns are she, her. To describe myself, I'm a Black woman. I have short, natural hair. I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a black jacket and a black t-shirt. Thompson, do you want to describe yourself? What you wearing?
Oh, I'm wearing a check shirt, and I'm in my bedroom, and I'm an artist.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we thought we would do, Charlotte and I and Thompson, is that we would start by just profiling two of our artists. So that's Thompson and I we'll start with like a 10-minute just to chat about him and his practice. And I'm actually going to try and screen share to show you some of his work while we're talking. It might go horribly wrong, in which case Sunshine's going to step in and help me. So Thompson, shall I?
Yeah.
Here we go. Right, can everyone see that? Is that working?
Yes.
Yep, good, okay. So if we start at the very beginning, Thompson,
Yeah.
do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself? Where do you live, your family?
Okay. Right. I live with my mum and my brother in North London. Nobody in my family does art. It's just me that does art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you start making art? Actually, can you just slant your iPad up a little bit so we can see you? Okay, tell us a little bit about how you started, how you found out that you liked doing art and how you got into making art.
I started doing art at school when I was 12 years old, and sort of like, I don't know, carried on from there really. Just took it from there and just kept going with it until one day, you know, my social worker decided to refer me to ActionSpace because she felt that I had an interest in art. So,
cool. And when did you join ActionSpace?
I joined ActionSpace in September 1997. So
wow,
it's been a long time. Yeah.
And you still look exactly the same, don't you?
Yeah, well.
People say, yeah.
Yeah.
And who are what inspires you? Who are your sort of inspirations? What artists do you like?
I like Frank Albach because his work's not, you know, I mean, it's very abstract. It's not like about real things. It's not, you know, what you see outside. And not only that, knowing that he's a Camden person like myself, so that explains it with him. Satie, I like the idea that he can mix colours and make them look in a way that gives a picture different facets to it. So, Anthony Caro, I like him because I like the way he makes his sculptures in these bright tubular forms, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there were two recent artists that you saw that you liked?
Oh yeah, there was Sean Scully that I saw at the National Gallery, where he painted on these big sheets of metal, I think they were, and using oil paints and using like really bold colours. And it sort of like reminded me of my own work when I saw that. Mark Bradford I saw as well, his work. It reminded me of the work that I was making before, where it was like all textured. Yeah. So.
Okay, well, let's look at some of your work.
Okay.
And what we'll do, I mean, obviously you joined ActionSpace over 20 years ago, but we're going to concentrate on the last probably sort of 7 or 8 years, because you took part in a lot of group exhibitions, you got a lot of attention, but in the last 7 or 8 years, you've actually really taken off as an individual artist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if we just look at some of your exhibitions, so your first solo exhibition was Postcards from Brighton.
In Brighton, yeah.
Yep. So and that's top left on this.
Yes.
So do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was postcard. Yeah, that was like the first solo exhibition I did, and that was part of a conference that was taking place at the, what was it, the Corn Exchange, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And the actual exhibition itself was in the Founders Room in Brighton.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like the conference.
And you were invited to do your impressions of sort of key places in Brighton, weren't you?
Yeah, key bits in Brighton, yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, Project Ability in Glasgow held an international conference.
Yeah, somewhere, yeah.
And you were invited to do an exhibition, so you completed it.
About the work, make work about some of the landmarks in Glasgow, like some of the places they have.
So that was bottom left.
Yeah.
Then you came back to the studio, and the large piece on the right, you started really experimenting.
Yeah, so
yeah.
That I did the experimenting on the painting that you see of the animals to add texture and that. And I think I painted that one because I had this thing about rainforests. I don't know, it was just an idea that I had. So I thought about all the animals that live in the rainforest.
Cool.
So.
And then your big breakout moment.
Oh right, yeah, that's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the commission that I did in Brighton in 2016. That was a co-commission with House. That was part of the Brighton Festival that they had, and it was in a townhouse, and I was exhibiting alongside 2 people. One was a Turner Prize winner, which was Gillian Waring, and Felicity Hammond. I think she was a young photographer or something. Yeah. Yeah. So so how
did you feel about that?
It was good. It was a great pleasure to be able to not only have my work in a house, but also to have my work being displayed alongside someone that's very established. So it was kind of something I would remember.
Yeah. And then from there, the next thing was that you and I and your studio colleague, Ian Wernast, and your artist facilitator, Lisa Brown, got together and put together a proposal for an exhibition. Submitted that to the Unlimited commissioning stream, and you and Ian were awarded a commission for My Life in London.
My Life in London, yeah.
Yeah. So that was a 1-year exhibition project.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. How did you go about that?
I remember we we had to apply before it, and then I don't know, I think we applied for it and then took it from there. And then we once we got it, we did 6 months of experimenting. Yeah, well, I wasn't allowed to make any finished work at all. So I had to do a lot of experimenting and trying out new techniques, new ways of working.
You went to galleries.
We visited
artists. So you did lots of research.
Artists, galleries, and just do lots of research in a way. Yeah.
And then the second 6 months.
The 6 months where I did my own set of paintings that was based on my family heritage. You know what I mean?
It was very much because you spent an afternoon with Professor Chris Spring at the
British Museum to
Looking
look
at
at
African textiles?
the African textiles, yeah. And I think from looking at those textiles, it evoked a lot of childhood memories of my own granddad. So it's kind of brought it all back, and somehow got to do a series of my own patterns and textures of African textiles.
Yeah.
That that I remember.
So what you did was you used the sort of kanga cloth sort of structure, but
Yeah.
you used it to sort of highlight your own places of inspiration and interest, didn't you?
Yeah, places of interest. Yeah, so I sort of like combined the places of interest with the patterns and textiles. Yeah.
And that was launched in London in March?
I was launched in London, the Bloc Project, where some of my family came to see.
I was going to ask you about that, because that was the first time your family came to one of your exhibitions, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And what was their reaction?
I think their reaction was that they were very proud that I've, made work that was based on something that they haven't seen before, because they rarely used to not see much of my work. So this was like the first time they actually saw some of my work. So it was quite a moment for them, really.
And for you, it's very important to you as well,
It was important for me, which left me slightly emotional.
Yeah, there were lots of tears. I remember that.
Yeah.
And then I was going to say, from the Bloc Project, then it went to the South Bank Centre.
We went to the South Bank Centre, where we took part in the Unlimited Festival itself, where we had a section of a wall where we had lots of work up on the walls and that, which was nice.
And your studio group came to visit, didn't they?
Yeah, the studio group came to visit. They looked at the work and they liked the work. And we got to meet, and I think on the opening night we got to meet somebody. Who was it? Nick Sirota, who was what was he? I thought he was.
He's the chair of the Arts Council.
Chair of the Arts Council, that's it, yeah.
And really liked the exhibition.
Yeah, he liked the exhibition. That was great, and it was nice that he, asked questions about the work and that. So it was good.
And then from there, it went to Glasgow.
Yeah, I went to Glasgow in February. And that was good to be able to exhibit work there at Project Ability. Yeah. That they were there in their own gallery space. It was nice. And we had school children that came, and they were looking at the work and they seemed to be inspired by some work. Yeah, so it was good.
Flip your iPad up a bit where we want to see your face.
There we go.
Okay, there you go. And then that led you, because then you started researching your heritage, but also the UK in general. Yeah, that led you down the route of doing some very political
stuff. Yes, yeah, it led into the political things, which was about all to do with the austerity and the benefit system and many other things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was all stuff I kept seeing in the news.
Yeah.
About food banks and stuff. So it was,
And it's worth saying, I haven't got the images on here, but people could see it on our website. Over the last few months during lockdown, you had sort of a mini grant from Unlimited to make work at home, and it was very much using it to process your experiences of being home and the whole COVID thing, hasn't it?
Yeah, that was quite a good experience to work for 6 months, and also to have someone like Lisa to talk about my ideas as well.
Yeah.
Well,
that was what I was going to ask you next, because we're going to have to tie up soon, but I was just going to ask you a little bit about ActionSpace and how ActionSpace works in your life and how it's helped you develop your practice and sort of what you feel beneficial.
I think I find it beneficial because it's made me gain confidence and have recognition for my work and be able to work with people that have the same interests in art like myself. So yeah.
And you mentioned Lisa, who's your artist facilitator, who's been working with you for 10 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you work with her? What's the relationship with her like?
I find it's good because I tend to just talk to her about an idea, and we sort of like work out ways of how it could work and how it could work. So
yeah. And you come to the studio once a week, don't you?
Once a week on Friday, yeah.
Yeah, and your group has very much been together for 10 years, and you're very supportive of each other, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to finish up, what next? What are you doing next?
Next, what am I doing next? Oh yeah, I'm going to be doing a
Transforming
leadership's course. Yeah. See,
with what's that?
That is where they have mentoring, and they have someone mentoring me how to help me develop my practice even further. And
who's going to be mentoring you, Thompson?
Mark Seeley.
Who is?
The curator,
Director.
The director of the
Autograph gallery.
Of the gallery, yeah.
Yep. And you're going to use that to develop a touring exhibition proposal, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll probably use it for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Month.
Great. Anyway, anything else you want to say just to wrap up?
No, I can't think of anything at the moment. No.
Okay. Well, shall we pass over to Charlotte?
Yeah.
Charlotte, you there?
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hi, thank you, Sheryl and Thompson. That was really good. So my name is Charlotte. I'm an artist facilitator and associate artist with ActionSpace. My preferred pronouns are she and her, and this evening I'm wearing a blue and white stripy top with a headscarf, and I'm a white lady, middle-aged lady. So I'm here to talk about and kind of represent the artwork of Naina Kalu. So Naina is not with us for multiple reasons, partly because she has quite a complex learning disability and has limited verbal communication. So this would be very, very inaccessible for her. So I'm sort of talking on Naina's behalf. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background. And I think before I go any further, I think Sunshine, we have a 2-minute film.
Yeah, I can put that on.
Yeah, just to briefly explain before the film plays, hopefully. Naina's worked with ActionSpace for 20 years. She is an incredible artist. Her work she works in both 2D and 3D, and over recent years she's become very well known for creating large sculptural installations with the kind of live performative element. So I will briefly explain after the film how we got to that point, how ActionSpace have supported an artist with very complex needs and on the autistic spectrum with limited communication to develop a really significant art practice. So I'll explain a little bit about that as best I can. But the film is a little edited excerpt of a film from Naina's work at the Humber Street Gallery in Hull, where she had her first solo show in a contemporary art space, which was massively significant. So the film is to sort of partly enable us to show Naina, without her being here, her process. So you can see her working briefly, and there's a little bit of a sort of explanation about the exhibition itself. It's only 2 minutes, it's wonderful. Sunshine, play the film.
Hey, here we go.
We're currently in the project space. We are installing a new project by artist Naina Kalu. We've created a series of suspended forms for Naina, and throughout the next 5 days she is using loads and loads of different materials that have been both pre-prepared at her studio and some that have been set up on site for her to do this wrapping process. Nina has a really unique approach to art making. We don't often see artists working live. Normally we see a finished product brought into the gallery space. It seems like her primary mode of communication is art making. She just constantly wraps and puts things together to make her sculptures. So for us it's a real privilege to present her first solo presentation in a contemporary art space.
Well, the film was a little moment of Nina working at the Humber Street Gallery in Hull. So as I said, it was Nina's first exhibition in a contemporary art gallery, which was incredibly significant. So Nina's worked with us 20 years in our art studio in South London. I've been supporting her for that long. So we have, we've got a quite close relationship as me as her kind of artist assistant facilitator. Nina has a deep need to repeat processes, to repeat marks, making lines, creating forms, and she likes to repeat actions until forms and lines build and build and build. Her work is incredibly large often, and quite hard to contain and very hard to look after because it's so big and unruly. But I think what's most important about Nina, apart from many things, apart from that she's utterly brilliant, is I think, having Thompson, having you talking, I think Thompson actually might have gone. Let me have a look. Thompson and Nina both work with ActionSpace, and they're both very, very, very different artists. And Thompson is fantastic at articulating what he does and how he does it and what he wants to do. Whereas Nina's situation is very different. She's not able to easily articulate her process, her needs necessarily, certainly not in a kind of complicated way. So she's able to express things on a sort of simplified level, what colours she wants to use and sometimes what materials she wants to use. But really my job has been about just laying out a massive choice of things for Nina to choose. So everything is accessible, everything's very available for her to choose how, what she works with and how she does it. So I'm there to kind of make sure that she can work how she needs to work, do those long durational processes of making, that she has an endless supply of the materials that she's chosen to work with, and she's sort of doing what she needs to do. In the last sort of few years, the last 10 years since she's been sculpting really has been when Nina's work's really kind of taken off in terms of the art world. And it's been utterly fascinating being part of that journey with her. It's been, yes, a real eye-opener. We've been learning an awful lot together, and ActionSpace as an organisation. So I think Nina took part, the biggest moment for Nina really was when she took part in the Glasgow International Art Festival in 2018, and it was the first time that her work was shown in a kind of contemporary art environment, where it was really seen in a level footing alongside other contemporary artists. And I think although we've always known for years and years that we've kind of been sidelined and moved around and sort of given lots of labels, it was the first time that Nina was able to work without that. And suddenly we were encountering art, gallery directors, art curators, critics. It was utterly amazing and fascinating. And Naina got her first ever review in Artists newsletter, which didn't once mention the fact that she had disability or was autistic, and was just looking at the work on its own merit. And they even said that her work was more riotous than Phila de Barlow, which is pretty cool. From GI, things have really taken off. So Naina then had her solo show at the Humber Street Gallery. That exhibition happened because John Hefferman, who is the director of Humber Street, or was a director of Humber Street Gallery, who featured in the film, though we didn't hear him talking, John came and saw Naina working at GI and just immediately fell in love with her practice and invited her to come and have a solo show at the Humber Street Gallery. So I think yes, and then from Humber Street, Naina then had a solo show this year. It got cut short because of the lockdown, with Studio Voltaire, which was really significant. And I'm sure Sheryl and me can sort of, when we talk after the break, we can go into more detail about that. A quick thing just to mention about Naina's practice, partly because of her limited communication, I was always very keen to support artists like Naina to share their practice in an unpressurized way. So, the art world, obviously, there's a certain language that you use to describe the work, and that wasn't always possible when it comes to an artist like Naina. And because her work is so process-based, and that is the core of it, the kind of that making is so crucial to Naina. I wanted her to have the opportunity to share that live. So what evolved over the years through lots of experimentation with Naina and seeing what worked best and what suited her were these sort of live installation happenings where Naina would work live on site and construct these huge sculptural forms. So she was able to share her process without having to verbalize it. She could do it through her actions. And it kind of grew from just being a sort of way of sharing into actually a performance, and it then started to inform and change the work. So this year for Studio Voltaire, Naina did it was going to be the longest live install that she'd done. As I said, we got cut short because of the lockdown, but she worked on site 2 days a week over 6 weeks, I think we managed to do in total, where visitors came, saw the exhibition and could see Naina working live. She didn't have to interact with anybody. She could get on with her work, and they could kind of see it growing in front of their eyes. And it was incredible. It was an amazing experience. I think Naina absolutely loved it. It really was a big shift. There was a huge shift at that moment where we had people coming to see her work, and seeing Naina making that work live helps the work make sense. I mean, it's strong and stands alone beautifully, but she is, once she's there making it, the energy completely changes. And yeah, amazing. So Naina's a really interesting artist. She is an artist with a complex need, but she is a contemporary artist. So ActionSpace is always very keen to try and frame Naina in the right way. And we see Naina as a contemporary artist who happens to have a disability, and we are there to try and support her and navigate our way through the highly complicated art world and disability world and politics and everything else that's going on. Yeah, I might leave it at that, because I could talk for hours about Naina, but I won't. And Sunshine, I don't know if you want us to go for a break now.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect point to stop. Thanks so much. I can definitely second or support what Charlotte was saying about watching Naina live. I had the pleasure of seeing her work live at that very exhibition in Humber Street, and it is just amazing to see not just how she works, but how you as well, Charlotte, and other people move around her in anticipation or in interpretation of her needs and desires. It was really fascinating to see that constellation move and create something. So yes, I think we can go for our little break now. It is exactly 7:45, so if we can be spot on back at 7:55, so we can continue the session and finish as much as we can on time at 8:30. So see you soon. All right, welcome back to the second part of tonight's Harsh Light. So in this part of the conversation, we were hoping to look at the language of care and inclusivity, which both words have pervaded the UK art worlds in different ways. Care has been cropping up in social movement organizing in the last decade and has seeped into calls for structural change by art practitioners recently. And inclusivity, on the other hand, is an Arts Council England key principle and is used a lot more at a strategic level. So as a question for Charlotte and Sheryl, what are your thoughts, feelings, frustrations, etc., with regards to these terms and the contexts from which they have arisen? And I'll just stay on screen because I think at some point you'll want to maybe include me. So, but I'll let you start the conversation off first.
Do you want to go first?
No, you go first.
No. Okay. I'm going to start where Charlotte sort of left off, which is ActionSpace functions in a lot of ways. We are there to provide opportunities for people with learning disabilities to practice art. But what we're specifically involved in and interested in is really helping artists with learning disabilities who want to develop professional practices. Obviously, there's a therapeutic element to doing art, and that happens for everyone, not just people with learning disabilities. So there is that to it. But one of the frustrations we have when we sort of approach partners within the sector is that there's always an assumption that we're coming from a community project or from a therapeutic or from a learning point of view. And that's great, and we like to engage on all levels, but taking in inclusivity should also mean for those who want to have a gallery practice, a curatorial practice, to have their work seen alongside other artists, that should be involved in inclusivity as well, and not just the idea that it's going to fit into sort of educational or community spaces. Starting point, Charlotte?
Yeah, well, I mean, Naina's journey to date through the art world, as I said previously, been utterly fascinating and complicated because, you know, when Naina first started working with us, she wasn't an artist and ActionSpace was more of a community project. But ActionSpace has evolved and Naina has evolved. And for a long time, it felt like no one had evolved around us. Yeah. So when people talk about inclusivity, for a long time in sort of disability arts, that mainly involved discussions around access, which was physical access and you know, access to galleries. That was mainly all people talked about, was just sort of getting people with disabilities in, not an acknowledgement that maybe some of those disabled people might be artists in their own right. So it's been quite, it's been a complicated journey to navigate away from community arts, which is not a bad thing. That's not a criticism of community arts. But Naina has developed an incredibly sophisticated arts practice over 20 years, or more than that now. So for her to still be seen in that light in some quarters is off the scale infuriating. And it's funny actually, because kind of maybe once or twice a year I sort of talk about Naina's practice to a wider audience, and I'm really aware that each year things change and evolve, and we can really feel it, can't we, Sheryl? There has been shifts in certain quarters. And today I actually spent a good chunk of this morning reading reviews from Naina's last exhibition, which was with Studio Voltaire in Mayfair in February to March. And as I said, it got cut short by the lockdown, but it involved a live performative element as Naina constructed her sculptures on site. She got significant reviews in Frieze magazine, Disability Arts Online, The Elephant, what's it called?
Elephant magazine, yeah.
Elephant magazine. And it was actually, I kind of, you know, part of me, I could reel out the stuff that I might have said last year about how Naina was being sidelined. And like I said, I think in some areas she still is. But you read those articles and there is a shift. That exhibition felt like a seismic shift in thinking and feeling from some people who came to see it and really, really got it. They understood it. So I think in the past there's been discussion around the fact that people don't know how to contextualize this sort of work, especially work like Naina's, which is process-based. They don't know where to put it, how to describe it. You read those articles, people know how to describe it. They're amazing. They're really like, it was quite emotional reading them because they really have got it and spot on. So where are we going wrong here? Why is it for an artist like Naina, you know, historically people used to joke about her doing the turbine hall, and I'd always be there going, why not? You know, why is that a funny thing to suggest? Naina is perfectly capable of filling the turbine hall several times over, actually, in a short space of time. But, you know, this idea that should be a joke because of her disability and because she has a learning disability, that's obviously always been an awful thing. But it's just I don't know. It's a funny one, isn't it, Sheryl? Maybe I've leapt too quickly and too deeply into.
No, I don't think you have.
But I feel like what has shifted is on the ground. It shifted the kind of curators and sort of artists, and we've had the phenomenal understanding and support and excitement that Naina's work produced by other curators and artists and people in general. It was fantastic. What we still struggle with is the sort of the bigger institutions. I feel like they're behind the curve. Is that fair to say, Sheryl? In kind of understanding that there has been a shift in thinking. I mean, it's really tricky. So Naina has, you know, we after her show at Glasgow International, she had a solo show at Humber Street, as I discussed earlier. And, you know, Naina got a review with The Guardian. And The Guardian, they did focus on the fact that she was autistic, and they focused on the fact that her work was sort of coming out of these compulsive behaviours. But we're not trying to pretend Naina doesn't have a disability. We're not trying to hide all that. It's just that Naina herself is not able to articulate her work to such a level that she could say that her work has got is issue based or has got a specific narrative. So you know, we try and just present it as it is, and her work sits entirely happily equally on the level with all other contemporary artists, you know. So it's I can't even remember the original question, Sunshine.
I was going to jump in and say that Charlotte says that ActionSpace has evolved. ActionSpace has evolved because our artists have evolved. I came to ActionSpace later than Thompson and Charlotte. I came in about 10 years ago. And at that point, I think one of the first things that Charlotte said to me is that we've got these artists like Naina and other people in her studio and some in our North London studio too, who've been coming to us for 10 years. They've developed a studio practice. We need to do something with them now. So I think a lot of the shift in ActionSpace was picking up on that and thinking in the same way that if you had any other artist who had been developing their practice for 10 years and was now at a point that they needed to get out of the studio and be showing their work to a wider audience, that's sort of where I came in. And that's what we've been doing for the last 10 years. And I think Charlotte is absolutely right in saying we've chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. But at the same time, the wider sort of world, the wider arts world has been evolving. as well. I think sometimes we have a frustration that we sort of feel that we sort of go a little bit forward and a little bit back. And also, I think with some of the larger institutions, and question mark because of the Arts Council focus on inclusivity, they're developing very much their community and education and all of that streams. That's absolutely fantastic, as Charlotte says. But I think what we would like to do is to have our artists seen working right across the board. So if they fit into the community space, that's great, they can fit in there. But we also want to see a place for artists like Nena and like Thompson and like Andrew Omeding, who we work with, and Pardit, who Charlotte works with. If they fit into that gallery space, we'd like to see them in that gallery space too. And as Charlotte said before, a lot of them will say, well, there isn't a context for the work. Well, there is a context for the work if, you know, when people think about it.
We had, as part of Nena's exhibition with Studio Voltaire, ActionSpace was involved in a curator's tour, which Sheryl was involved with. I just kind of spoke at, but it was fascinating hearing the discussions from some of the curators and sort of gallery directors who came to join in. So it was an Arts Council-led tour. So, you know, we're perfectly timed with Nena's exhibition to be able to showcase her as a contemporary artist, but you could kind of feel that there was still this sort of hesitancy, reticence to sort of commit to, I suppose Sheryl and me were slightly pressuring people to say, come on, give her a show, give her a big show somewhere. You know, she's just done, you know, she's done this to date, and why not the next step up? And there is this, I think they still don't quite know what to do. Yeah.
There was a lot of where does it sit? And I think for us, where it sits is beside her peers. Thompson and Nena don't sit in the same category. Their work is very different. Thompson, you know, as he explained to you, he sees his work, and I think it's absolutely true, sitting beside Sean Scully and Mark Bradford and people who paint. Nena's work sits in a different place. And I think for us, that's where we would like to see the work sitting, isn't it, Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like we don't often have really honest discussions with institutions about what they really feel. And, you know, there's all sorts of reasons for that, obviously. But, you know, there's always this sort of, I mean, I think, Sunshine, we've talked about this before, this sort of unspoken hierarchy within the disability arts world, as well as the arts world, as well as the whole world. And, you know, artists like Nena, for somebody with such a complex need, has often been, will be at the bottom of the pile because she's not able to, you know, go out and seek adventures for herself in that sense. She relies on us entirely. And I think that, you know, I think some of the institutions and galleries feel very uncomfortable with that. They don't feel comfortable with the fact that Nena requires such a high level of support. So there's a few things going on there. Obviously, such a high level of support means something costs more money. Because Nena requires both a care worker and an artist facilitator to deliver a project. But it's also, I just think there's that barrier, and this is where I was saying about, I'm not sure about these, we've not had these honest conversations, because I think that they see, you know, because I'm there and I'm very present, that I'm, you know, influencing Nena's work too much or something to kind of, I'm too involved. I think there's an uncomfortableness around that, which is really, really frustrating, because I am there responding to Nena's needs. She's driving the work forward. It's very clear that she is. Anybody who watches her working can see that. And I think that they just sort of, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm kind of, I don't know, Sheryl, what do you think?
Well, I was going to say, it's worth saying that we're very aware of that too. And within ActionSpace, I mean, we have about 8 artist facilitators. We have 3 studios across London, 8 artist facilitators, and it is a conversation we have all the time. And we do police ourselves all the time too, because we're also very concerned that we're not influencing or overstepping. I always say though, even, you know, our most complex artists, like because I'm not an artist facilitator, so I can say this. I don't think we could influence any of our artists. And I have never seen a situation where we could. Nena is very in charge of her practice. If Charlotte introduces anything or tries to persuade her to do anything, she'll probably throw it at you, really, won't she? And pretty much all of our artists are like that, because they are artists and they know what they're doing, and they are very definite. So I think what our facilitators do is they introduce options, or as Charlotte says, they respond to them and bring in options, mostly in terms of materials, very much based on observation and responding to what the artists want. But having said that, we're very aware of the danger of that, and we do spend a lot of time talking about it, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, it throws up all sorts of issues. I just think it's been fascinating, sort of, you know, Nena working in contemporary spaces, engaging people's response to it, and you really realise how many people generally in the world don't encounter somebody with a more complex need than someone who's got limited verbal communication. So people will sort of very rely on me to you know, explain what's happening a bit. And there's a nervousness around it. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it, Sheryl? And how people interact with Nena herself.
Yeah.
And people, you know, so when we, I hope John doesn't mind me saying this, John Heffernan from the Humber Street Gallery in Hull, but, you know, when he first saw Nena working at GI, he was really excited and said, we want her to come and do what she's done there, do it in Hull, do it for the people of Hull, because it's brilliant. So that's what we did. But all through the planning of that, before Nena arrived on site in Hull to install the exhibition, you know, we had some really good conversations, and John was just asking me, how do we interact with Nena? Like, how do we talk to her? And it was just really refreshing to hear someone just honestly ask that. And just be able to talk through it, you know, and it's really important. She's just a person, and sometimes we all need reminding of that, because you know, it's it's important stuff. But I think it also adds to this other layer of things not being accessible when it comes to sort of applying to funding or stuff like that, because you know, we're having to there's lots of funding streams where they're really not keen for an artist like Nena, for us to apply for funding on behalf of Nena, because they really want to have absolute evidence that Nena has asked for that herself, which is really difficult. You know, we have to make lots of judgments on Nena's behalf, lots of decisions based on what we know she likes doing, and that's a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. We're always very careful that we're trying to make the right choices, the right moves for Nena, which is why we're always very keen that she's not being sort of you know, used as a token artist in any situation, or that she's sort of labelled in any certain way, and that she's kind of free to be whoever you know, who she is. But it makes it hard when you're trying to apply for funding and somebody wants complete concrete evidence that Nena's sort of, you know, exactly wanting this precise exhibition with these precise people in that place. Because it doesn't work like that. You know, our level, how we care for Nena as an artist is we have to care for all aspects of her and her work. So we are artist assistants, but supreme artist assistants working at a very, you know, a very high level of responsibility.
It's worth saying that though also applies for someone who's a lot more able, like Thompson, because I worked very closely with Thompson and Ian on their Unlimited application, and you know, the support they need is sort of, you know, suggesting, developing, looking at options, and you know, the same things have been put forward that we've led them in it. But again, it's responding to what they want, but what they need. There is no way they would be able to do an application on their own. or develop the idea. I mean, Thompson and I sat in on a Unlimited have just launched another round, and we sat in on sort of a seminar that they were doing about how to apply for funding, and they were asking for questions, and Thompson's questions were, well, what do you want us to do? Where should we do our exhibition? You know, that's the sort of, in the same way that we need to be involved with them, and they do need our support like that. So that is a frustration. And also to make the point that we're not leading, it's very much in response to what we instinctively know they want because of observation. And because I think the other thing with Charlotte and all of our artist facilitators is that the relationship between the artist facilitator and the artist, and in most cases, it's been a very long relationship. With Charlotte and Nana, it's been, what, 20 years?
I think it's 21 this year. So this is the longest time, this lockdown period, that I've not seen her, actually.
Yeah. So there's a lot of sort of an intuitive knowledge of their practice and where it is developing to, and it's, you know, and trust. There's a lot of trust in there, isn't there?
There is, and a lot of ABBA as well.
Dancing.
So Nana's a big fan of ABBA.
She is, actually. We had very quick, but it's been last week. I had my first Zoom sort of creative sharing session with Nana. It was really difficult because Nana really struggles to, she has a visual impairment as well, really struggles to see a screen properly and struggles to interact. So not only does she sort of experience digital poverty in terms of, you know, that her residential home where she lives doesn't have all the lots of lovely equipment for the staff to use, but she also just literally struggles to access the concept. So last week I had a very strange Zoom session with her, but today it was a bit different, Sheryl. It was really good. And I played quite a lot of ABBA. So we spent an hour drawing and singing very badly, mainly me. But yeah, so I've known Nana very well, but I'm obviously, you know, we always have to check ourselves. But these last 2 years, getting input from the art world, which I feel like we've been deprived of for years. It's like we've spent years just kind of doing stuff at a local level, meeting lots of lovely local people but who don't necessarily get it, and always knowing that Nana was sort of being deprived of the real platform she needed to let rip as an artist. And, you know, finally it's happening now. It's been brilliant, and Nana's just been absolutely loving it. You know, she's totally in her element. It's incredible, but it's been a long time coming. It really has, actually. And then now all this has happened. So, you know, anyway.
And that's the biggest frustration, is that just before we locked down, it felt like everything had changed. It felt like, you know, there was a week where Nana was at Studio Voltaire, Into Art were at Collect and won a prize. Jennifer, who's on this call, was showing an exhibition in Islington. You know, we had just had Andrew at Camden Art Centre. The curators tour came, they were really positive, and it just felt like everything might have just exploded, and sadly it all stopped. So we're rather hoping, you know, that the art world isn't completely decimated by this, and that when we all pick up again, that it can pick up again, really.
I know, and actually I want to use this to kind of carry one of the questions that came up in the chat about, do you think galleries are becoming less resistant to people who need support or thrive from collaborative work? So I guess
think the small ones.
Yeah.
I think the small ones.
Yay.
Yeah, it is very much. I agree. I mean, I think that's what I was trying to say before with the sort of curators and, you know, this isn't ageist. I don't mean it. I suppose we just happen to have met some, Cheryl's pulling her face at me, but, you know, kind of, we've met some younger artists who've got a different approach to this and are kind of very open to it. And I'm sure there's people of all ages who think exactly the same. But I do think that there is an old school thinking that the institutions feel stuck in that still. And it's very frustrating. And, you know, for years, whenever we try and contact a major gallery, they would just sort of say, you want to speak to the education department, and we're still slightly in that. You know, they're struggling to sort of shift their heads, but they know they have to. They're aware that the on the ground things have changed, but I think they don't quite know how to do it. And like I said, there's concerns, because they're concerned about an artist like Nana who needs such a strong level of support to deliver her work. I mean, you know, in all honesty, Nana would not be where she is within ActionSpace. She just wouldn't.
No.
Because her work requires so much support. And I think there is a nervousness around that. But, you know, that in no way takes away the value of Nana's work. Her work is so important. And for her Studio Voltaire show, like I said, I think we've been deprived of having input from the art world. So hearing comments from curators and artists and visitors, all sorts of people, was really, really, you know, it was bolstering, it was amazing. It totally reinforced everything that we already knew, but hearing it back was just absolutely brilliant. And kind of so many people, like on Instagram, were kind of leaving comments about Nana's work, and you really realize the impact of it. And because I'm sort of there with it all the time, you don't necessarily, you know, you're there living with it, but her work is so important. And we had a mother of an autistic son who came, and her son, while Nana was working, her son came and took his shoes and socks off and ran around the exhibition, touching, because all Nana's work, you know, we're inviting people to sort of give it a squeeze and things. And, you know, they were there for ages and ages. And she wrote the most beautiful thing on Instagram afterwards, just about how she felt, because Nana's work is all about binding and wrapping and containing and building, and she just said that she felt, as the mother of an autistic child, that she could feel that Nana was trying to control the world. It was her way of expressing comfort, control, trying to manage things, and she wrote it in the most eloquent way. And it's it's hard for me to quite express how much we haven't had input from other people, because our world has felt small. You know, we've been sort of maneuvered around the outsider art world and disability arts and educational stuff and all sorts of things, and it's not helpful and it's not healthy to get an overview of the work. Sorry, Sunshine, I'm ranting.
Oh no, it's really marvelous to hear, because I was just saying in the chat in response to what you and Sheryl have been putting out there, is just how much it's about, like, you know, almost having to be there, like just like how having to be there for Nana's work just explains everything. And I wonder if that is partly an answer to Ben Yao's question about, like, any other, in what ways can the funding application process be improved so that artists with disabilities can be included in a more equitable way? Part of me wonders whether it's just like putting in a video of like an artist working and seeing, you know, so that a potential funding body could just see the way an artist work and just click, and not have artists need to write like pages and pages of stuff that make no sense to them personally. You know, like it's also clear with Thompson, he communicates in a particular way. Nana is nonverbal, so this is a meaningless process for artists like that. So I don't know, what would you add to that,
Cheryl?
Well, I think it's yeah, I mean, video, all of that, but I think it's also accepting that the support that our artists need is us writing the funding application for them, and that we're taking it from them, and all we're doing is verbalizing what we intuitively, or, you know, as I said, going back to the relationship with the artist facilitator and knowing what it is they want to do next, taking it that all we're doing is verbalizing what they want. And accepting that. And obviously we evidence things. I mean, we do use video, we use sound, we use films, we use photographs, we use everything. But I think just accepting that there is a role for the artist facilitator, the support. And it's the same thing. I think there was a question about, which Charlotte mentioned too, about galleries and learning how to work with us and accepting our role in there. And that we're there really to support the artist in the same way that if they had a physical disability, they would need a whatever. with our artists what they need as us to support them. Okay, Charlotte?
Yes, yes. I mean, I think it's just that, because we discussed before, Sunshine, the sort of the monolithic thing of disability, when actually it's incredibly complicated, and sort of even comparing Thompson and Naina is not, they're very different artists functioning in very different ways. And it's hard when I know sort of historically putting in funding applications, if you say that you work with people with complex needs, you sort of, the funder at the other end of that isn't necessarily going to really understand what that means.
People don't know what complex needs.
No, if somebody with dyslexia could say that they have a complex need, and then you know we've sat in on seminars where somebody has talked about their disability, which is obviously entirely valid. But they've got like 2 PhDs and an art career and have had loads of, whereas, you know, Naina's in an entirely different situation. So I find it's very hard to unpack all of this, and I'm not sure I have the answer. I think certainly for an artist like Naina, having the opportunity to share her practice in a non-verbal way through showing films or a live action would help reinforce any sort of, convince anybody that she would need the money, give us the money. But, you know, I think for people to meet her and really understand her would be a really important thing. Whereas not all artists could do that. You know, some people would really struggle with meeting a funder or what have you. But I think making it a more personal experience would be very helpful. And it's that, you know, the language that's always required to satisfy funders. You know, Naina doesn't have that, and Thompson actually is very able to articulate his work beautifully, but can't always do it in the sort of usual way. And it is interesting because I think as sort of Naina and Thompson and other people have been sidelined over the years, you know, ActionSpace is, as an organisation, we get sort of shuffled around. And it is really interesting how, sort of talking about kind of honest discussions, the 1 or 2 people that we've had properly honest discussions with us have said to us, well, you know, you're not saying the right thing, or you're not writing the right thing, or you're not portraying it quite in the right way. And it's sort of like this constant thing that we have to bend to them. We have to shift to their language and their way of thinking. And, you know, it's very hard to navigate the art world for anybody. And, you know, Sheryll and me are just humans trying to find the right way through for ActionSpace and our artists. But it's incredibly unfair. It really feels tipped against many people who are neurodiverse often, because they just can't tick all those boxes. They can't do all the socializing and the networking and say the right things and describe things in the right way. And it makes it even harder with someone like Naina, whose work is so process-based. If the art world is saying that they can't contextualize it, they don't know how to frame it, and then the pressure is on for us to do that, and we're not academic. You know, I can describe what's happening, but there isn't enough at the moment, enough stuff to sort of support the framing of this work, which is so important.
I remember there in our conversation we had mentioned a need for a critical language that is able to not just describe, but really like kind of bring some cohesion to the way someone like Naina works, but not just Naina, but like art. I guess artists who might not be very verbal. And I think what was the word that you brought up, Sheryll? Something about kinetic or body mind or something like that.
Well, no, I think you did that actually. I think it was, I mean,
No,
she works intuitively, so it's you know, it's a physical response. Naina and her sculptures and her drawings, whatever she's wearing, she becomes one with them. So it slips this performative.
I think the other thing, I think what I had said, because we've got, what's been really interesting for me working at ActionSpace is the whole concept of learning disability. Because it's not straightforward. Our artists are really bright. In a lot, I think neurodiverse, as we keep saying, is really more sort of a bit better description, because they think differently. We've got artists who are visual thinkers. We've got, you know, as we said with Naina, we've got artists who are kinetic thinkers, who sort of think by doing. And so it is about framing it, but also I do feel very strongly that what I wouldn't want to do is to create another stream of disability arts, because I do think that the work needs to stand beside other people who are making art, that are making art in the same area
Yeah,
as them.
that's true. I didn't want to, it wasn't my intention to try and frame it again within that. It would be more of a catch-22. But yeah, that's true. That kind of movement-based, process-based support kind of process is just so fascinating. And I think, and Nana's not alone in that. There's so many artists that work in some variation of those methods, needing some sort of external support to do the work they do. In fact, one of the participants mentioned that all artists need some form of support in some way. But I think what's really special in Nana's situation is how evident that makes it, like in terms of domestic support, life support, learning and material support. All these dimensions really come to bear in an artist like Nana. But I'm also aware, sadly, that we're coming to 8:30, and it's just every time it feels like time just flies by, and we're just getting to the meat of things. But I just really want to thank you, Sheryl, Charlotte, and also for our interpreters, Catherine and Max, Dave, of course, as well, who's been working in the background doing all the technical stuff. But yeah, there he is. But any other questions you might have, please go ahead and just type them into the chat, or concerns as well, comments. In fact, we're probably going to send an email out. David will send an email out to everyone for you to contribute any comments and evaluation to us, which we will definitely read and take to heart and hopefully improve in our future session.